Well, let's open up our Bible tonight and look at the book of Colossians in the 3rd chapter, beginning in verse 18. And let's notice here that the writer now is going to turn, after telling us that everything we do should be done in the name of the Lord Jesus. Whatever we do in word or deed, it should all be done. And so everything about that, and we've said this book really teaches us the value of seeing that Christ is everything. And when Christ really is everything to you, I mean, if you've got Christ, you've got everything you need. You might say, I don't have anything to eat. Well, you got Christ, well, you've got all you need. It's hard to imagine that having Jesus is having everything. And when He gets into everything you do and everything you think about, you have finally dawned on what happiness, contentment, joy, essential living, I mean really living, that's what really living is. And when people stumble onto that and realize Christ is all I need, I can do all things. If I've got Him, I can do everything He wants me to do. His strength will help me do whatever He wants me to do. And so when we can learn some of those fundamental things about life, it will affect everything about us. But now notice, when we now look at the latter part of this book, the writer turns to talk about relationships. And I want you to think about the fact that when you read these verses, and we're going to scan through them in a moment, you will see over and over that there's one thing that governs every relationship in life. And believe it or not, it's what we've been talking about. Christ governs every relationship in life. And when you think about your marriage and you say, well, I'm having trouble in my marriage, maybe my wife is having trouble submitting to me for some reason, maybe I don't earn her respect, or maybe I'm not treating her right, but in some way I'm having trouble. It could be you're not having trouble with your wife. It could be you're having trouble with Christ. That could be what the trouble is. And the more you will try to be like Christ, you may find out some of those other problems will go away. And some wife may say, well, now my husband, he won't take the lead, and he takes advantage of me sometime, and he just kind of becomes a tyrant rather than a leader, spiritual leader. And so you may, ladies, be struggling with that. Well, I'm going to tell you, if you think about maybe it may not be your husband, it could be that that's a lot of it, but it could be that maybe it's your relationship to Christ that's affecting that. Children with parents, parents with children. You know, sometimes I've read where men say some parents think when their children were young, they were wonderful little people, you know, and they grew up, became teenagers, and the green-eyed monster possessed them and took over, and they didn't know what happened for a period of time. But I'm going to tell you what, if you have trouble with your teens, it could be that your problem is with Christ. And young people with your parents, it could be, if you're having trouble with your parents, it could be that you're having a problem with Christ. And on the job where you are in the market today, I know you say, well, I'm not a slave, and the master of the job, the boss on the job is not the slave master, but you may sometimes feel that way. I'll tell you, if you're having trouble in your job and you say, thank God it's Friday, you know what will make you say, thank God it's Monday? Is to think about Christ. And thank God you've got a job to go to. And so if you go at it with everything that's in you and you think about Christ, treat everybody the way you should, you may find that you could change the factory. You may become the president of the company. You don't know what will happen. But it's amazing how, listen as we read these verses. Wives, submit yourself unto your own husbands as is fit or proper or suitable unto the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and be not bitter against them. Children, obey your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing unto the Lord. Fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they become discouraged. Servants, obey in all things your master according to the flesh, not with eye service as men pleasers, in singleness of heart, fearing God. And whatsoever ye do, do it heartily, as unto the Lord, and not unto men, knowing that of the Lord ye shall receive a reward of an inheritance, for ye serve the Lord Christ. But he that doeth wrong shall receive for the wrong which he hath done, and there is no respect of persons. Masters, give unto your servants that which is just and equal, knowing that ye also have a master in heaven. And so the writer then turns to talk about other application of that, but let's just talk about these relationships tonight and spend some of our time talking about how we can make those a little better. When you begin to study the Bible, of course, and you come to the 2nd chapter of the book of Genesis and the creation of man, and then when he named all the animals, saw the animals, and he saw that there was not anything suitable for him, then God put Adam to sleep, and he took the rib from him and made the woman. and brought this woman onto Adam. When Adam saw the woman, he saw the value of her. This is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She should be called woman because she was taken out of the man. And so we find here that God tells us that what he was doing was making this woman a suitable or a helpmeet for the man, a counterpart for the man. And I have told about in my neighborhood where I live, been living for almost 40 years, that my neighbors always kidded me, the women especially, because when my wife pulled in the driveway at our house, I told her to always toot the horn. And when she would toot the horn, me and the boys would run out and we would carry everything into the house. She was not carrying anything else. That was a man's job. And I always had trouble because my wife was always wanting to do the man's job. She was always wanting to carry things and do things. I said, baby girl, you take care of the ladies' things and let us carry the loads and do the things like that. And so my neighbor ladies would come and say, would you train our husbands to do those kinds of things? But you know, you've ever seen in the building sometime a man will come in the building carrying his Bible and come up and sit down on the third or fourth row, and he'll come, the wife, she's got 2 babies and a baby basket, and she's trying to come in here and crawl in and get to a seat to sit down. And you just, you know, when my wife comes in the room and she's carrying something, I'm gonna go to her and take away what she's carrying and carry it for her. I want her to see that I know that she is to me something very fragile and precious and valuable, and I don't want her to think that I want her to be some old. If you want somebody who can whoop you up and beat you up, that's your business. But I want a lady that, you know. I hope I'm not seeming offensive by saying that, but I want my wife to be a lady in every way. I think that there's nothing she could do any more glorious. And I tell you, I could not do the work I do. And be able to think the way I do and to write sermons, because if it weren't for my wife, you see. Now, I've told people everywhere I go, if you all are watching here when I'm preaching, you may wonder, so why doesn't he have an outline? Well, my wife is lip syncing all this, and I'm watching her, and she's going like that, and I know what to do, see. But I'm going to tell you what, she helps me in every way. And I'll tell you, I told people when we first got married, our marriage was like every marriage, I guess. You know, I can remember when I first saw her, my heart started beating fast, and I told myself the first instant I saw her, I'm going to marry this girl. And I don't know what it was. There was just something, I don't know whether it's the smell of her or the looks of her or what it was. There was just something that overwhelmed me. I felt like she had put a banner up over me and conquered my heart as soon as I saw her. But I can remember as we courted and dated and began to build a relationship and get to know each other, how much I began to love her more and more all the time. And finally then when we finally got married, and that was all a kind of a rush job, I have to tell you about, because I went in the military, was going overseas. We were supposed to get married on a Friday, but the military made me cancel that. So she ended up getting it all back together. They gave me a couple of days, got married on a Tuesday. Or a Monday, I can't remember. I always tell people with wilted cake and wilted flowers and stale cake. But we got married, and she came to Germany, and we lived in a little 2-room apartment. The Germans turned the heat off in those places at night. And so when you go to bed, I always told people, sometimes my wife and I would get in a little fuss, a little disagreement about something. But because we knew you would freeze to death at night sleeping by yourself, about 9:30 we always made up, because Ecclesiastes says, how can 2 be warm alone? When 2 lie together, they have heat. And so we learned the value of 3 cold before, and putting people together, and 2 people working together, they have a great reward. And so my wife and I learned that early. And I was going to say, when we first got married and we began to come together, we would have some disagreements. And sometimes it seemed like we would have a real disagreement. It would take us sometimes I think maybe almost a day. We would get mad and kind of stay mad about that for about a day. And then as time went on, we'd get over that, we'd get back together and say, oh, this is the most wonderful thing. And then we'd get upset again. And so we'd kind of weave out again. But then it seemed like as time went on, it started out, we would have these big things like that. And then it began to get where it went like that. And then it got to where, and now we can say some sharp things to each other about something we disagree about. And in 10 seconds, we're hugging and kissing each other again. Because we've learned that those things don't really matter. You need to express and work things out and solve your problems. And you need to be honest about things. But you don't need to fall apart about that. Now, it takes sometimes some years to learn that. And so what you see in Genesis, the 2nd chapter, is a picture of God intended for two people. Somebody said it's like two rivers run together somewhere. One man illustrated up in Pittsburgh at the Allegheny and the Monongahela rivers. They run together right there at Pittsburgh. And when they do, all this water runs together, and mud and rocks is going every way because there's two forces coming different directions. You know, my wife didn't cook the way my grandma did, my mom did when we got married. And I learned pretty quick not to say that, you know. And so there were just a lot of things about that, you know, that you had to learn and adjust to. But I want you to think about the joy and the excitement and thrill of two people who work at becoming one person. And, you know, it's amazing to me now. People come into our house, and my wife and I, and we will be talking, and the lady or the man will say something to me, and when they say something, look, my wife, she'll go like that. And I don't know what that means. She just said 1,000 words to me. And so I'll start saying this, you know, and then she'll be talking, I'll look at her and I'll go like that, and then she'll start saying something to the lady. And, you know, we can carry on a conversation without saying a single word. And many times we're driving somewhere, and I say, you know what, I think this. She said, I was thinking the same thing. It's amazing how you just, and it's such a joy. And I'm going to tell you, when you're younger and going through all the bumps, and you think, oh, this is terrible, I'll just throw this away and get another one. Let me tell you, you're going to go through the same bumps no matter where you go. I mean, people who come together, they have to work things out. And so you might as well just stay where you are and work through it and solve your problems and learn as you get older. It's such a joy. I'm so glad I've still got the same girl that I started with. She's a blessing to me, and I know it don't always work that way. I know it's not. It takes two people to make that work, and so I'm not saying to make anybody feel bad or feel guilty. Please don't think that. I'm saying this for the young people that are hearing me, so they will learn and see the value. My parents separated when I was young, and it just about destroyed me trying to deal with what happened when my mom ran off and left. And so I'm just saying, think about the joy of what God intended at the very beginning of two people coming together. And when they come together, these two people, they become one flesh. And when they leave their mother and their father, and you know, my wife and I went to Germany again, and we got over there. I was making $97 a month, and we got hungry quite often. And so my dad found out we were running short on money, so my daddy sent me $20 one month. And my wife said, oh, look, we got $20 from your dad. I said, send it right on back. And she said, well, we could use it. I said, I know, but if you don't mind, let's just send that back. And she said, why? I said, because if my daddy starts paying our bills, he's going to think he can tell us what to do. And he's not the head of this bunch, I am. And so I wasn't a Christian, but I knew I was supposed to take care of my family, see. And so I would go out and buy 100 pounds of potatoes, and we'd eat potatoes at the last week of the month, and we got through it, and we did, and it was a blessing, and we learned how to survive on what we had. And we didn't have a car. We had to walk everywhere we went. We just barely had the clothing that we needed. And so, but we did just fine. And it was by being away from our parents for 2 years, and I tell people, sometimes you need to cut the psychological umbilical cord. You know, you can move out of the house, move across the street, and you can have moved 1,000 miles away if you cut the psychological umbilical. But some kids get married, and their parents still control, and the parents want to, and the kids want them to, and so they just stay, and so that creates a lot of trouble. And so what you need to do is make up your mind, I'm going to become one with this person when I get married. Mom and Dad, I love you, but God bless you. You keep your all's business over there and keep your money over there, and we'll work on what we got, and it'll be just fine that way. And so if you can learn the value and the respect you have for each other, and really how your parents, as time went on, my daddy, it upset him because, and my mother also, because that we didn't cave into that. And finally, as years went by, my mother bought us a big deep freeze, and my daddy bought us a television. They'd been separated, but they just appreciated what we had, and they still to this day, or my mother still just can't get over how she talks about how I talk to Diane, how much I love. She said, I don't see most men talking to their wife the way you do and how you refer to her. She said, if men would do that, it would sure help things. But I'm saying, you look at the Genesis account and see what God intended, and if you start off with that as a foundation of what you're doing, Jesus brought this up in the 19th chapter in Matthew, and where the Pharisees went to Deuteronomy 24 and verse 5, and I'm sure you've read that. If a man have taken a new wife, he shall not go out to business. He shall not go out to war or be charged with any business. But he shall be free at home 1 year. And listen to this, men. And cheer up his wife which he hath taken. That always tickles me. The woman just got married, and God said, you better learn how to cheer her up. Well, what depressed her? But the point is not that she's depressed. The point is that man doesn't know how to cheer a woman up. Men need to learn how to cheer a woman up. You've got to learn that, you see. Women are, they see and they sense. And I've said, you know, a lot of times at church we'll get the men together doing something and maybe have a pitch in somewhere. And the women be in the kitchen and the men are in the living room somewhere and the men are sitting there watching the ball game and we're all bored watching the ball game. Oh, yeah, they just made a touchdown. And the women are in the kitchen, they're laughing and cutting up and having fun. I want to go in the kitchen and hang out with the women. They seem to see they're busy and they enjoy what they're doing. But I want you to see the value of what men and women. So ladies, don't feel like that you have been shortchanged in some way. I think that there's a kind of a movement among young girls. They want to be more like men because they feel like, and you know, they've even done some studies in school. They'll ask, how many of you boys want to be a girl? It used to be that no boy would raise his hand. But they say, how many of you girls would rather be a boy? And believe it or not, there's some girls who wish they had been boys. You see, they feel like they've been, and it's because we as men sometimes have not respected and valued the beauty and the significance of what God made in this crowning act of creation when He made woman, the value of what she is, the wonder. And that's why the Bible shows what the beauty in Proverbs 31 of a woman and the influence she has when she does what God says. And so Deuteronomy, it seems to me, helps us to see that when you get married, one thing you need to think about, I tell young people this all the time when I'm involved in a marriage. I have 5 sessions with them before I get involved in it. But I tell them, listen, when you first get married, please think about this. Give constant attention to your marriage for the first year. I said, plan on Friday night going out and splitting a McDonald's cheeseburger. If that's all you got the money to get, plan on taking off somewhere and going and getting a cheeseburger, sitting under a shade tree by the river somewhere, and just spending time together. And I said, spend time. Don't work a lot of overtime. Don't get busy. Don't keep having a lot of people piling in on you. You spend the first year of your life devoted to making sure the other person's bowl is full first. When you get something, always make sure that your wife has it first. When you get in the car, men, always make sure your wife's in the car before you get in. Shut the door. You go right and get in. If it's raining, you pull up the building and get her in the car. You show her the value that she is to you, and you say that when she cooks and cleans house and does all those sorts of things of value and appreciate her. Tell her about her beauty. A lot of times women, we have learned, they sense who they are by what their husband says about them. And so if you make your wife feel ugly and unvaluable, she's going to feel that way. You don't want that. You want your wife to be happy. Your job is to cheer her up. Learn how to do that. And so what that says is, don't go out to war. Don't go off somewhere and fight some war somewhere for the first year, and don't get involved in some company where you got to give all your time to your company. If you give your first year to making sure your mate is happy, what you will find out, I tell everybody, at the end of the first year, let me tell you what you're going to say when you go out on your anniversary dinner to eat somewhere. You're going to look across the table at each other. You're going to say, this is so much fun. Let's do it again next year. And what you'll find out is every year, your marriage will just get greater, and you'll find yourselves getting closer and closer, and the excitement and the thrill and the joy, it's a marvel. I love my wife more every day than I did yesterday. I'm more thrilled and more excited about who she is because we have worked at it through the years. And so you see that in Deuteronomy 24 and verse 5. But you know, there's some other statements in Proverbs 24, verses 3 and 4, where there the Bible says, I might have mentioned this, by wisdom a house is built, and by knowledge it is established, and by understanding all the rooms are filled with pleasant and precious riches. I've mentioned those 3 levels of learning. But notice, you know how a house, you know what makes a house? The word house, there's the word family. What builds a family? What makes a marriage? I studied with some people one time, and they thought that it was, they asked me if I would talk to them about their marriage, and I said, sure. So I told them what the Bible said. They said, well, we're not sure. So they went out and they got 2 dogs, and they thought if it got a dog each, that would help them. And they got 2 dogs. Their dogs did like they did. Their dogs fought all the time. Then they thought, well, we'll get a couple cats. So they got 2 cats, and the cats and the dogs fought. And then they even bought a monkey, and their house smelled like a zoo when you went inside of it. Well, they called me back and said, come back and talk to us again. We're just not making it. And they bought a new car, and they moved into a new house, and they had bedrooms finally on each end of the house. And they said, what are we doing wrong? I said, you got to go back to the Bible. And I said, if you will learn, study each other. If a house is built by wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, that means my wife is my study project. And I've told this about when her brother died years ago. He died on my 33rd birthday, I believe it was. And he had heart surgery. He had 4 heart surgeries, and he struggled. He obeyed the gospel before he died. But anyway, when he died, my wife and him even shared a room when they were little. They had 9 kids in the projects, and they were poor, and so she shared a room with Mike until she was a little older. And so it took the wind out of Diane. And I could just tell that she was so brokenhearted. She couldn't find much joy in life. And so I would notice quite often when I couldn't find her, I'd say, where's Mom? The boy, I don't know. I'd look out in the yard and she wasn't in the kitchen. I couldn't find her. I'd go back in the bedroom and the lights would be off. And I'd go in there and say, baby girl, what are you doing? And she'd be rubbing on the furniture. She said, oh, I'm dusting the furniture. Now, I'm not very smart, but I know you don't dust furniture in the dark. So I thought there's something else going on here. And so I'd say, baby girl, I said, why don't you pack up some things and go down to your mama's and stay a couple of days and see if that'll help you go back to some of your old memories and try to put some of that to rest in your own mind. She said, I think I'll do that. And so she'd pack up and go down there, and she'd come back and she'd be a little better. And we'd go along for a little while, and then before you knew it, I couldn't find her again, you see. And I've said, you know what some men would have done? You know when I'm always looking for my wife? At lunchtime. And so most men would have, when they got, where's my wife? Go back and find her in the bedroom, and you say, honey, what are you doing back here? And she says again, I'm dusting furniture. Most men would have said, well, get out here and make me some lunch. Most men wouldn't have had the wisdom to see. Here's a broken-hearted person who's got scars that are so deep that she needs somebody to understand that's what it's about. I wish we men would wake up and get a little wisdom and get a little understanding, a little knowledge of what a woman is, what God made in the marvel of a woman. And so I would tell Diane again, go on down to your mama's, And finally she got over that. And, she got past that now. As she's gotten older, other things have made scars in her mind and her heart. And so I just want to say to us that if we can see that the ideal in Proverbs 24 is to make sure that you're studying your mate all the time. When you talk to your wife, don't read the newspaper or look at the television. Look into the eyes of your wife. And when you start seeing them getting a little red or pink, and you see some water starting to come down, don't think she's got an allergy problem. You've hurt her feelings. And so try to figure out what you can do. And so if men would just spend a little more time, it seems to me, if we would be more what God wants us to be, I think our wives would have greater respect for us, and we would not be saying, well, my wife, the trouble I made, my wife just won't submit to me. Well, maybe you old hound dog, maybe you haven't paid any attention to what's going on. I studied with a man and a woman one time, and the lady, I went over there, and the husband hadn't quite come in yet. And she was saying, my husband just doesn't show any emotions. He never tells me he loves me. He never compliments me or says anything good to me. And so he came in his car and got out, and he had this big old yellow dog out in the yard. And he got out of the truck. That yellow dog jumped up on him, put his paws on there. He wrapped his arm right out in the yellow dog, and they licked all over each other, it looked like to me. I mean, it looked like they was kissing each other a time or two. And so anyway, he dropped the dog down. He come on in. And so we started studying. And I said, buddy, do you compliment your wife and kiss her and hug her and tell her how much you love her and do things like that to her? And he said, oh, no, I'm not that kind of person. I said, what? I said, you're a lying dog. He said, what'd you say? I said, you're a lying dog. He said, what do you mean talking to me that way? I said, I saw if you treated your wife the way you treat that dog, I wouldn't be over here talking to you two. I said, when she comes in, you come in and kick that dog out of the way. Come in here and grab your wife out of the way. You won't be bothering me coming over here and telling me about your marriage. I said, you've got to show this woman every single day. She's got to know every single day. I heard about a man who got married, and after a while his wife thought he didn't love her, so she went to get a divorce and went to the divorce, talked to a lawyer, and the woman. The man said, well, what's the matter? Why are we getting divorced? And she said, well, you never tell me you love me. He said, well, when we got married, I told you on the day we got married, I love you. And I told you if I changed my mind, I'd let you know. Well, I'm going to tell you, it don't work that way. You've got to open your mouth. And I'm shocked. I've had some studies with men at Madison. And there are men say, I just can't. I can't. And, I'll say to these men, and I notice this about a lot of men. I'll tell some man, well, I sure do love you. And they'll go, well, I respect you too. They can't say they love me. They think there's something wrong with telling somebody, and their wives, and these men said in this men's study we had, so, well, I just can't tell my wife. I said, what in the world is wrong, you sick heads? Go see a psychiatrist or read your Bible or do something. Something's wrong with you. We need to see what the Bible teaches. And so when we see what these Old Testament passages tell us, in Psalm 127 and 128, I have a Jewish commentary that I love to look at, and it calls Psalm 127 a psalm of prosperity. And that always tickled me because there's nothing in that psalm about money. That psalm is about the home. And if the Lord builds the house, unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain that build it. That word house again is the word family. Unless the watchman, unless the Lord keeps the city, the watchman waketh but in vain, and it's foolish for you to rise up early and stay up late. And so the writer just paints a picture here of the wife being like a fruitful vine beside the house. And I've seen that so many times when I've gone to other countries, go to India or somewhere in Africa, and you can always tell an old bachelor from a man who's married. And when there's a woman in the house. Because if you go down the road and go in somewhere to have a Bible study, and you come up on this hut, and there's this old thatch roof house with a mud wall for the outside of the house, and a round hut, and you see blue paint on the bottom of it, and you see a beautiful vine growing up on the side with beautiful flowers and blossoms on top of that building, and you see where it's been swept out around the front of there, you know there's a diligent woman living here, taking care of this old boy. And I told some of these men in India, we talked about marriage, and they said, well, we got married so we'd have somebody to carry firewood and carry water. I said, you old boy should have married a mule. That's what you wanted. You didn't want a woman, you wanted a mule. But you see, that's not what God intended. But if we could just stop, and I know this may be offensive the way I'm saying this, but just stop and take a look at it, men. That's all I'm saying. I'm a man. If I was a woman, well, I wouldn't be up here with her. But if I was a woman talking to women, I'd be laying into the women. I'd say, women, you better do this. But I'm a man, so I'm going to lay into you men, see. If I was a woman, I'd be jumping on the other fence and tearing the ladies out. But I want to say to you that I think it would help so much if we as men, I think that women would, if they could respect us. I preached a sermon years ago in Columbus, Indiana on 1 Peter 3 about how that the woman is to respect her husband. And I went back to the back of the building when I got finished, and this man came back there to me, and he was walking up there ahead of his wife and said, honey, I guess you heard the preacher tonight, didn't you? He said, you're supposed to respect me, honey, and you're supposed to call me Lord. What about that, honey? And this lady walked up there very humbly. She bowed her head down. She said, yes, honey, I heard the preacher, and I believe everything the preacher said. And she said, I will be glad to call you Lord and respect you when you start acting respectable and act like a Lord. You see, sometimes we don't, and I'm not justifying women not doing their role. Please don't think that. But I'm just saying that I think we would make it a lot easier if we as men would take more seriously the treasure of what a woman is and to value her. And so those two Psalms, you might go home tonight and read those two Psalms, because each one of those Psalms 3 times says the man that fears the Lord, God is going to bless him. And he's going to have, his children are going to be a blessing. There's going to be a blessing on Jerusalem, a blessing on Israel. And that just simply says, if we will act right as a family, you know what will happen? Our nation will be a greater nation. You know what makes strong nations? It's families that are strong. You know what makes strong churches? It's when families are strong. And families stand together and raise their children right and respect God. And so the Old Testament is just filled with statements like that. Well, let's just read this. In verse 18 again, wives, submit. That means to rank yourself under. Now, do you think, ladies, when that's kind of humbling that for me to submit myself, rank myself under my husband? Well, let me ask you something. How bothered are you by submitting to the elders? When the elders ask something to be done, do you ladies feel like you're a second-class citizen because you're supposed to rank yourself under the elders? Do you feel like you've been robbed because you're not an elder? I don't think most places think. Or what about when you get out on the street and drive your car and a policeman pulls you over and you're supposed to submit to the government? Are you bothered and troubled because you feel like you're not a full American citizen because you have to submit under the... I was in school, I played football, and everybody had a job on the team. I wasn't a coach. I wasn't an assistant coach. I wasn't the athletic person that helped you when you got hurt. I had a role and everybody else had a role. And when everybody got in their role and did their job, I'll tell you, we won games. And I'll tell you, we took state 2 out of 3. Now, it wasn't because of me, but we took state 2 out of 3 years in high school because everybody learned, you do your job and let that person do their job. And don't try to be the quarterback if you're not. Don't try to be the end. Don't try to be the guard. You be what you are, and you get in your place, and you do. And when people get in their place and fulfill their role, let me tell you, your life is going to come up. Now, you might say, well, you don't realize how long we've been going wrong. I'm going to tell you what, I've seen people who got into trouble and had fusses and fights and mess, and they got separated and divorced, and one of them went off and lived in another city with another person, and I ran into the lady one time who was living in another city with somebody else, and I said, would you like to sit down for eat lunch with me and talk about the Bible some? And she said, well, yeah, we'll just sit down and talk about it. She was upset and mad at the church because of all of what happened in her marriage, so I sat down and talked to her a little bit. And she got mad in a hornet as we went on, and so she finally got up and left. Well, I went home, and so about 9:30 that night, she came to my house with a Bible. And she said, this has always bothered me. And she said, I know can we talk some more about this? I said, let me tell you something about your husband. I said, I told your husband, you always wanted a house, and you always lived in an apartment. He wasn't even trying to get a house. He wasn't concerned about it because he didn't want to have to mow grass and things. I said, I told your husband, I said, your wife left you because you didn't try to provide what would help her. She wasn't asking too much. She just wanted to get out of an apartment and raise a family. And I said, you need to get busy and buy a house. And so he got busy and bought a house. And so I said, do you know what your husband's doing now? She said, what? I see he lives out in a house out in Hanover. She said, he bought a house. I said, he sure did. She said, why did you? I said, because he wants you to come back because he knows what God told him to do and he failed. So she said, well, where does he live? I said, well, we'll go out. It was about 11:30. I said, we'll go wake him up. So we went out there and woke the old boy up. We sat down and talked. And about 2 weeks later, they got married in my backyard and had another child. And so it just shows you, don't think, well, it's just such a mess that it won't. Let me tell you, it can work. But you've got to make up your mind, it's me and the Lord and not me and my mate that's having a problem. It's me and the Lord that's having a problem. And if you work at it from that direction, try to get closer to God and quit whittling on everybody else. We always like to look at somebody else as the problem. But here is the picture of a woman. This is fit, it's proper. The Lord, this is what the Lord wants, ladies. So don't think that's some disgrace to you. Verse 19 says, husbands, love your wives and be not bitter against them. I've told a lot of men, it's easy as time goes on, if things don't work the way you want and hope, that you kind of get where you just get bitter, And that statement in Hebrews, the 12th chapter, about a root of bitterness will spring up, and thereby many will be defiled. I've told this old story about the boy, you may have heard about him riding on a train years ago. They used to have this stuff called quinine water, and the old boy was riding on a train, and he fell asleep, and his head hung back like that, like people do when you're preaching, and his jaw was open. And this old boy, who was a prankster, he thought, I'm going to drip some of that real bitter quinine water down the old boy's tongue. So he dripped some down on him, and it went down there, and when it touched the old boy's taste buds, he jumped out of the seat, started screaming for the conductor. And the conductor came and said, what in the world? What are you screaming? He said, what happened? And the man said, I don't know what happened. He said, I went to sleep, and I think my gallbladder busted. All he could taste was bitter. Well, I'm going to tell you, you can get to where, if you're not careful, if you don't watch it, all you can think about is bitter. You're just bitter. The Bible says, men, don't get that away. That's where you're headed if you're not careful. Don't let yourself get that away. Get up out of that old bitter stuff you're into and come out of there and start doing something. And what you need to do is to love your wife. Treat her right. Do good by her. No matter what she does to you, you treat her right. Children, obey. Listen, young people, to your parents in all things. This is well pleasing to the Lord. Children, I know you think, and so my children were smarter than me. I told about my boys got a paper route when they were too young. I got them a paper route. They were 9 and 11 years old. And so I got them paper route, and I told the fellow, said, well, they're too young. I said, well, I'm going to help them. I had paper routes all when I was younger, and I'm going to help them. So I went home the first day, and we went down the street, and I had the numbers. I was walking down the middle of the street, and I said, counting out the numbers, and the boys were throwing those papers down the street. We went around and delivered all the papers. Well, the next day, I got into a Bible study with somebody, and they got heated up. It took a little while longer, so I got home late. And I got home and said, boys, come on, let's get them papers out. And my older son, John, he was 11 years old, he said, Dad, we already delivered the papers. I said, son, you couldn't. I said, I delivered papers probably 5 or 6 years. I said, you couldn't memorize all those houses that got papers the first day after you delivered them. He said, Dad, I didn't remember all the houses that got papers. I just remembered the 4 or 5 that didn't. I thought I would have never thought of that, you know. My children were smarter than me when they were little bitty fellas. But you see, they still had to listen to Dad. They still had to respect. Young people, listen to your mom and dad. They love you. They're trying to help you. And I tell folks about my boys when they got up, about juniors and seniors, they started getting a little smart with their mom sometime. I'd tell the boys, listen, fellas, y'all are in the 4th quarter of this ball game here. I said, we're about to send you to college, and we're about to pay the bills, and we're going to keep you in the school as long as you want to stay in there and go. But if you all fool around and mess it up here at home and get out of here and we have to throw you out, you have to run away, I said, you're going to be on your own. So if you want a free ticket, you better stay on the game on the 4th quarter, behave yourself, and respect your mother and listen to the laws of your mother. Proverbs 1, of course, verses 8 and 9 shows that the law of your mother and your father is to be respected. And so, you know, sometimes young boys would try old mom. I was overseas one time, and the boys were pretty big, and Diane, we never let the boys fight. Matter of fact, I told the boys, I said, if y'all are going to fight in this house, when I find out you've been fighting, I'm going to make you kiss each other on the mouth. They said, oh, we're not going to fight, Dad. But one time they were scuffling around. I was overseas, and Diane, she went, because they wouldn't pay much mind to her, she went and got the broom, went over and cracked them on the head with a broom. And buddy, that hurt their heads good. And so they settled down. Well, she went and put the broom in the fanner in the washroom. Well, my oldest boy, John, he got up, went over there and grabbed the broom, opened the back door, and threw the broom out in the backyard. But he got the point. He didn't give her any more trouble. And so young people, listen to mom and dad and respect them. Fathers, don't provoke your children. Notice this says, provoke them to anger. You can stir them up and you can excite anger in a child. You know, there's only so much that you can. I've learned that humor is one of the best things in the world for teenagers especially. And trying to find ways when things get tense. I could tell you a lot of stories tonight about when my boys, I'll just tell you a couple real quick. My oldest son, John, wanted to get an earring, you know, and he was in the school and said, Dad, I'm going to think about getting an earring. What do you think about that, Dad? I said, son, that's fine. But I said, let me tell you. I said, anybody in my house anyway, and whatever people do, that's fine. I said, there's nothing wrong with having an earring. But I said, if you wear an earring in this house, everybody that wears an earring in this house has to wear pantyhose in the house too, see. So I said, if you want to wear an earring, you got to get you some pantyhose with it, and that'll be just fine. Well, he didn't say any more about that. And then Scott, he went off. They was in a basketball playoffs, and he wanted to carve his basketball number inside of his hairdo. So he called Diane and said, Mom, I'm going to carve my number inside my hairdo. And she said, Scott, that won't look very good. He said, you better talk to your dad about that. And so she gave me the phone, and he said, Dad, I want to get my number carved inside my head for the basketball playoffs. And I said, that'll be all right, son. But I said, make sure you have Mom carved on the other side. He said, what? I said, yeah, man, I have Mom on the other side. Well, he came home. He didn't have anything. And Diane said, well, I thought you were going to get your number. He said, well, I was trying to get Dad all riled up and see if I could get him flustered. And he just didn't seem to be bothered about it, so I just let it go. Sometimes they're just trying to try the water, you know. You have to learn that about young people. Don't tear the world up and shoot your kids just because they're trying to test you a little bit. You have to learn ways to deal with them. But so children, you learn to respect your parents. And parents, you make sure that you don't provoke your children in some way, that they just become exasperated because of what you've done. They become discouraged. And then servants, of course, here's a picture of anybody in some kind of a servitude. Make sure you always give your heart because you're serving God. My grandmother taught me years ago. She said, go to work. She said, I don't care what you do. Work hard and do everything. She said, now everybody else will be aggravated and bothered about you because they'll think you're trying to butter up to the boss. But she said, you go to work and you find things that you don't enjoy and you learn to enjoy. That's amazing how you can learn to enjoy something you don't like. You ever notice that? I couldn't stand sauerkraut and kale greens. I eat all of them I can get nowadays. You can learn to enjoy all kind of things if you make your mind up to do it. And so I'd go to work, and as a result, I got on jobs, and I'm not smart at all, but I was able to move up through some ranks among jobs where I was before I started preaching. Now I've started preaching, I'm at the bottom of the barrel all the time. But you can move up the ranks in all kind of ways if you just go to work and work hard. And my grandma said, if you go to work and work hard, when it comes payday, you can walk up to the boss and say, okay, partner, how much are you going to give me today? And you can look him right in the eye. But he said, you know, most old boys and get the paycheck, you got to come up to boss like that because they know they've been hiding and sneaking around and they're embarrassed about it. And my grandma said, when you go home from work, you'll lay down at night and you'll sleep hard and your rest will be sweet and you'll get up and feel good because you're doing what God intended. And so let's all learn whatever we're doing, whether it be a boss or whether it be somebody in a servitude position of some sort, let's make sure that we understand that principle about we're serving the Lord Christ. That's what we're doing. So we're not doing it to please our boss. I had one time a boss, I was going to start preaching. And it made the company mad because I was going to quit. They wanted me to take a leave. I said, no, I'm quitting. I'm burning every bridge so I won't come back. I'm going to try to preach and I'm going to make myself stay at it till I get it working. And they said, no, just take a leave absence, come back in a year because it may not work. I said, no. Well, they bumped me off my job and put me on a job digging a ditch out back, thinking that would make me mad and I'd change my mind. And so I was out there digging and on the second shift even, put me on the second shift. And the old boy was watching over me. He said, you know, there were some other guys out there working with me. Well, these guys would sit down and take a break. Well, I just kept working because I like to work. I love working. I just kept working. And finally the boss came to me and said, are you sick? What's wrong? He said, I leave to give you a break and you just keep on working. Don't you understand that? See those other guys? I said, yeah, but I'm not doing it for those guys. I'm not doing it for you. I don't care whether you're watching me or not. I said, God's watching me. And whatever I do, I'm going to try to do it with all my heart. Put all my strength into it. I don't care if it's something I like or not. It's amazing how your life can be changed. Everything about your life. It's amazing, the marvel of what life will be if we can just come to value that. Well, I talked too long, didn't I? Thanks for letting me come. I hope I've been of some kind of benefit to somebody. And if I've offended you by my poor ways, please forgive me because I just wanted to come and help the church here. If you're here tonight and you're not a Christian, can you see what we're calling you to? We're calling you to serve Christ. And you begin by confessing your allegiance to Him if you have a desire to repent, to change your will, and to do His will, and then to be baptized so your sins can be washed away. And you become a part of this big family. And then you go out those doors out there, and you go out tonight, and you say, okay, I'm going out a different person. I'm not going to be what I used to be. If you can make up your mind you want to do that tonight, my friend, everything's ready. Why don't you come? I will sing the song to encourage.